You ever notice that sometimes keeping a promise is, it's inconvenient? Sometimes keeping a promise is actually going to require more of you than the promise itself. I mean, the personal sacrifice that you're going to have to make, the things that you are going to have to endure to keep a promise, they can be pretty significant. And if you're a good leader, you kind of factor that in to the idea of, making a promise to begin with. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I'm 2 weeks away from 27 years married. 27 years. And in 27 years, I remember back now to the day that we said I do. And we made those promises to love, honor, and cherish, to love, honor, and obey, to sacrifice in goodness, in sickness, and in health, for better or for worse. And we've had some better and we've had some worse, and we've had some sickness and we've had some health. We've had some rich and we've had some poor, and never uber rich, but sometimes uber poor. But I look back 27 years now and I realize there were some times that I made some commitments, some promises to be involved in the lives of my kids, to show up when they had things going on, to be a part of what they were doing. And sometimes I broke those promises, because I'd made a similar commitment to my workplace. I'd made a commitment to the job. I'm different now than I was when my kids were young. I like to think I'm a better person now. I wish I'd been this person when my kids were kids. But I can tell you now that I value a lot of those commitments that I broke more than I did when I broke them. That's a hard lesson to learn. That's a tough lesson to learn. It's a tough lesson to learn as a leader, that you've got to become aware of all of the commitments that you've made in every direction. The ones you've made to your spouse, to your family, to your children and grandchildren, to your neighbors. We have a neighbor right now who doesn't mow his yard. The grass burrs are knee high. I've mowed it for him several times, but they also destroy the grass in my yard by allowing their kids to play in it. So I've kind of lost the grace to mow their yard for them for free on a regular basis. But now I'm going to have grass burrs as a result of that. Did I win or did I lose? See, we have a neighbor commitment to take care of yourself and take care of your stuff so that it doesn't impact the people around you. If you leave your jar, let me say that in English. If you leave your yard full of trash or junk cars, your neighbors aren't going to be happy very long. That's why some people form HOAs. It's about having good neighbors. It's about having a policy and someone who can enforce that policy to say, we don't do that around here. We don't allow that around here. And sometimes in our relationships, we need someone to hold us accountable for those commitments, those promises that have been made. Because good leaders, they know how to keep those promises. They also know that sometimes those promises come at a high price. And maybe on a simplistic way, you might think of, all my buddies invited me to go away for the weekend to play golf or to go fishing or to go deer hunting or go out on the sailboat. And I'm looking at the calendar thinking that's the only weekend I have to go do that thing. But then I also remember that was the day that didn't get on my calendar, but it's the day I was supposed to take my child to visit their university. Or that was the day that I was supposed to be there for the dance recital. I mean, how many times have we seen it play out in the movies? I believe it was even in the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sinbad where they're fighting over the doll and he misses the school program. But how many times have we seen that play out where dad or mom is off in some big business affair and they miss what to them is, one of a million dance recitals, plays, whatever. But it's the one that tends to scar their child for life. See, we forget sometimes that those promises we made, they didn't seem that big to us. We made them out of convenience in the moment. We made them because it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. And we didn't necessarily measure the cost of what would happen if I break this promise. Better question, what would happen if another commitment came up that held a higher priority at the same time as that promise? Will I still keep it? On a real brass tacks kind of an issue, we've been in the entertainment industry for almost 20 years now. And in that industry, we take a deposit, is what we would call it, or a retainer agreement. We send out a contract when we know we're going to be booked for a particular date. Whether it's a wedding, a graduation, a prom, or birthday party in the backyard, doesn't matter. But our commitment to our clients is verbalized in our agreement. Once we've received your signed agreement, we expect payment in full, regardless of what happens. Once we receive your deposit, that date is booked for us, regardless of what happens. And if something happens to me and I can't personally perform, we will provide someone at our expense of equal capability to perform that event. What we won't do, though, is accept a contract for a higher paid event. And trust me, that happens, especially when you get into May and October. Those are 2 months where the wedding industry and the school industry gets really, really busy for entertainers. Proms and graduations, after graduation parties, weddings, they all want to happen in May and October. So it's really common that somebody will say in January, hey, I'd like to book you for my event in May, but by the time February, March comes around, they haven't paid their deposit yet. And they'll call us and say, just want to make sure we're still on for our event. And I have to say, I'm sorry, I didn't get your contract back and I didn't get your deposit back, and we have accepted another event. Now, if they told me up front they're pretty serious about it, I will at least give them a courtesy call to say, hey, somebody else is interested in your same event, they're ready to pay the deposit, but I talked to you first, are you ready to pay a deposit or not? It's also very common that I'll have an event that'll be a small backyard birthday party. It's several $100s, but nothing significant. And then I'll have somebody call and they want to do a bigger event and it's 4 or 5 digits. And it's real tempting to take that 4 or 5 digit party and send the deposit back to but I don't do that. I know there are people who, in our industry, who do that. They intentionally take a very small deposit. So if a bigger opportunity comes along, they simply refund the small deposit and move on with their life. To me, that's a breaking of a promise or a breaking of a commitment for the convenience of a greater opportunity. That's not good leadership. It's common practice for some people, but it's not good leadership. Now, when we think about leaders in an organization, a corporate, a larger family, a government, a military, when we think about the commitments that are made and the commitments that need to be kept at that level, we're talking about a whole different thing. We're talking about international policy. We're talking about global relationships, things that have taken sometimes decades or even centuries to build, and once destroyed will take centuries to rebuild. Once that trust is broken, once that promise has been made and not kept. That's why, as you look around the world and global history, at the World War I and II, we had the Axis and the Allies. We had that group of people who had one mindset and another group of people who had another mindset, and collectively they fought together against each other over a worldview, over ideology. And as the world has morphed a little bit, we have different allies, but most of our allies, England for an example, Israel for an example, have been allies for many decades, pushing centuries of time. And as we look at those allies, we have to ask ourselves, have I made commitments to my allies or to new allies or to people who we're trying to build a relationship with that would cause me to come into question from a priority standpoint my commitment to other allies? Have I made a promise to do something that will violate the relationship I have with someone else? Now, if you're a leader at any level, let me reiterate, there are leaders who lead only a household. There are leaders who lead a community or lead a school district or lead a congressional district. There are leaders who lead enormous companies like a Zuckerberg, for an example. And when those commitments are made, sometimes keeping that commitment is going to cost you a lot of money. Sometimes keeping that commitment is going to cost you personal relationship. Sometimes keeping that commitment is going to cost you great opportunity that you thought could really compel you to the next opportunity. But if you break that commitment, if you give up on commitment A to accept commitment B because it looks like a more compelling opportunity, it looks like something that really will take you to the next level, it looks like the opportunity of a lifetime, ask yourself this question: If you're unfaithful to the first commitment, why would anybody trust you in the next? I remember when I was in high school and I was dating someone who was already in a relationship with somebody else. And I remember my mom making the statement, look, if she'll cheat on him with you, she'll cheat on you with somebody else. Leaders, that's what commitment is about. If you are unfaithful in the commitments you have right now, while the commitment is small and the price is small and the consequences are small, if you won't keep those commitments, why would anybody trust you to keep bigger commitments? Whether it's a business agreement, it's a contract, it's a relational agreement, or it's a global treaty. If you won't hold steadfast to the ones that you've made now, why would anybody trust you to make the next one? My challenge for you today as a leader is to simply have integrity to say, I've made a commitment. And even if keeping that commitment cost me lots of money, even if keeping that commitment means I disappoint someone now, the fact that my integrity says I keep my commitment means more to me now and in the long run than the other opportunity. Now, obviously, there has to be an exception to every rule. And there will be times. As an example, I have done everything that I can to make the commitment not to work on my wife's birthday. 27 years we've been together. If an opportunity comes up to DJ a wedding on her birthday, as an example, or to do a filming for another client on her birthday, or to take a business trip on her birthday, I never agree to those things without asking her first. That's a genuine, you can ask her. Send her a message. Facebook right here, tag Karen Norris in it and ask her. Has he ever taken an event, a contract, a client commitment on your birthday without first asking you? If she remembers one, she's better than I am, but I don't remember one in 27 years of marriage that I've committed to do something on her birthday or our anniversary without asking her first. That's a big deal to me. It may not be a big deal to her, but it's a big deal to me. And that commitment means even if I forego the profit of another event, that's a commitment that I'm going to keep. All I'm asking you is, will you make the commitment? Will you negotiate that commitment if it comes to that? But will you keep that commitment if there is no negotiation? Will you keep that commitment even if it costs you? That's what good leaders do. That's my challenge for you today. Do you have the integrity to keep the commitments that you've already made, even if keeping that commitment will cost you? I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.